All right, kicking things off with the first Bach Sonata for solo violin in G minor. This is many people's first approach to Bach, and it's kind of overwhelming because you look at the first page and there's just tons of notes, and you don't even know where to begin with the rhythm. But what you'll understand with solo Bach is that, of course, it's a solo violin, and so you're very much free to take timing. But that doesn't mean that you can just do whatever timing. Of course, your timing must be guided by the notes and the rhythms and the beat structures. And so we'll take a little bit of a look at that. What's really beautiful about Bach, and with this movement you can clearly see, is that there's a clear progression of harmony. And I talked about how harmony is kind of big chunks of music rather than little details. Melody, you can zero in on the inflections of every little change of notes, whether it goes up or down. But harmony, it's very much a big scope of the music. So we'll obviously take a look at that. So I thought I would just play through parts of it and just explain my approach to it. Very beautiful opening. Of course, we start with G minor. I like to think of this piece in two, so kind of a very standard harmonic progression there. We go 1, then 5, then 1. So the first chord is very controversial, right? Because there's so many different ways to roll it. In some of my previous recordings, you might have seen me go playing it as a full chord, 2 and 2. I have changed my approach slightly, but I think that approach is totally great, and that's the way I played for a very long time. But I like to actually play the note and roll it out more, because I find that it's a little bit more baroque. It is less direct than the 2 and 2, and I do find that it helps bring out the bass line a little bit. As I'm doing a lot of hymnal playing these days on the piano, when you play a hymn, you've got 4-part texture, right? And so, of course, you want to bring out the melody. The inner voices are kind of in between, but the bass line is important as well. It really is the foundation, and that's really kind of where you develop the harmony. So I do feel that by playing the chord in this way, I mean, the ear immediately hears that low G, and it immediately thinks, oh wow, that is a very bass chord. So an important thing with these long lines is this G, top G. You want to make sure that you keep interest throughout the bow, right? You know, I'm really keeping the sound focused all the way until there, because it's so easy to go obviously I'm exaggerating there, but you get the idea. So the it really is an overarching phrase. Here, of course, we have this sort of appoggiatura. So of course we want to bring out that dissonant G. So here I do think you can come a little bit less because we've reached tension, release. On this higher dominant chord, I do feel like it's creating more tension and it wants to resolve. I feel that this is not... It's kind of high tension, and we're on the G and, the E and the A strings, so it's very high. I'm doing multiple bows there. But I think if you don't play maybe with as much tension, you can do... That actually creates the overarching phrase more. But the way I was doing it, it was more tension, so... more pressure, so therefore I use more bows, but both options can work. Here, you want to leave out that B at the end, the B flat, because that's where the melodic line resolves. So this figure, sol, la, si, do, re, mi, si, si, la, mi, re, re, comes quite often in this movement. It comes again later. And I think of this kind of like a gesture, right? Because we've had these grand sweeping gestures in the beginning, but this is sort of a smaller gesture. So I like to bring it out a little bit. Descending bass lines are always so beautiful, so we have that here. Another common thing you'll see in Bach is these 2-and-2 bowings. And my teacher, Mr. Sloman, would talk about how he wrote those bowings there for a reason. So he wanted that that sort of articulation there. And so I would definitely bring it out with the bow. Here we leap up a sixth. So and the harmony becomes tense all of a sudden. Right. So that is a very tense moment. And I very much increased the pressure there, as you could hear. This is kind of like scrambling a little bit. I think it's probably, up until now, the most chaotic falling 16th note run. It's actually 32nd notes. So you can kind of bring out that sort of roller coastery gesture. This measure here is kind of a respite, right? Because we just went through so much turmoil, and then finally let's have some peace and let's go back to G minor. Of course, it doesn't last for very long. Another very large leap there and dissonant. And that's kind of an unexpected harmony as well. Here we go to E flat major. Again, a respite from the huge leap that we just had. Again, this 2 and 2 gesture that we hear so often in this piece and in Bach. And so it's really beautiful because it's like there's two voices, right? We've got the lower voice joining in on the second gesture. So really enjoy that. It's like two people singing at once. You can't do that when you're singing alone. Here we have another instance of the descending bass line. And then back to. So that's extremely beautiful. So as you can tell in my past interpretation, I was bringing that out a little bit. So the melody is nice. Mi, re, la, sol, fa, mi, re, sol, mi, re, do, la, sol, re, sol, fa, sol, mi, fa. I think it's more of a sort of passing melody, though. I wouldn't say that this is a grand gesture and the main melody of this piece. In fact, this whole movement, it's hard to really say if there really is a melody, right? Because it's a lot of big gestures and flowing notes. So it's very much about the harmony and the descending bass line here, and little gestures. I think Bach is very much about little gestures very often. So beautiful. So again, we're going through many different harmonies, and it's very dramatic. It goes up and down. And even though we're not going to very high on the violin in terms of positions, again, you have to think Bach very vocally. And it's going up to the E string, which is already very much higher than the G and D strings, right? So he really utilizes all of the range of the violin, and it really means something. The last harmony here even even though you do not play the full harmony there, that is the harmony, right? And you do play it in the beginning of the measure. So that does carry throughout. But you have to sort of imagine that that dominant harmony carries over all the way until the resolution of D minor. So we've gone from G minor to D minor. So we're in a different key. We're in 5 land minor now. Again, there's another one of those appoggiaturas. Of course, you got to use your elbow there to really get the 5th in tune. Cool, so actually we're in D minor, but then he does this trill thing, which is very similar to earlier in the piece, first line. But here, that diminished harmony, it's seemingly leading us back to this G minor. So it seems like he wants to go back to G minor here, which is very cool. So there it's leading to E flat major, which is, I guess, the flat 6 major key of G minor. So we go through, again, so many different keys here. So we do go back to G minor. Sort of a circle fifths of progression. Another one of those 2 and 2, and it's reaching upwards and it's developing and you're singing along with the bottom voice. It's another duet here. It's very beautiful. So we're trying to reach for the new key of E flat major here. This is kind of tricky, and there's in fact the same gesture earlier on in the movement. Here. This sort of reaching back and forth, and that's same here. Really quite uncomfortable with the right hand here. Because I want to be so delicate with it, right? Of course, I'm playing with a quite higher elbow right now, but if I wanted to play with the low elbow, I could, and I could make the string crossings more with my upper arm. But in general, I don't play with as low of an elbow now because I find that with Bach especially, there's a lot of lift and controlling the ends of notes. I have much finer control when my elbow's higher. And there's many other reasons for that, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, soon. what I liked about what I just did there was it was a little bit more connected deep into the string, right? If you're too high up, it's very easy for every single note to be kind of a tenuto. It could feel like you're really trying to not play into the string, which is not the case. I do want to dig deep. This, for me, is the real intense climax of the movement, because we're in the diminished chord, which leads hopefully back into G minor. But we've really kind of been building up to this point, right, in the whole movement. It's so kind of dark, actually, very somber G minor. And it's very sort of a relatable key, right? We've been through hard times like this, and this is really the climax of the piece. And we have gone through E flat major, you know. There, 5, 7 of 4. So this chord, I don't mind doing 2 and 2 rolling because it's so intense. That can work too, I suppose. And that would bring out the bass line more, right? But, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, so you can do either, really. But I just think because it's so intense there, I like to play it with full volume, full virtuosity. So there's a fermata, of course, and you want to take very much a lot of time. Beautiful diminished scale arpeggio going upwards. Again, the violin, 4 strings, you can think of it like bass, tenor, alto, soprano, but we're going the full range here, and so this is a huge sweeping motion upwards to C minor, actually. And important thing here is the string crossings. In general, I haven't talked about string crossings yet, but they're very apparent in Bach, and I'll just talk about it here briefly. The note before the string crossing, I'm preparing my elbow. It's already moving to the new string as I'm doing the previous note. So here, so it's always good to practice these legato notes sort of separate like that. Because then you can really see where the string crossing occurs. Of course, it's not fast enough to the point where it's very apparent if you don't have the most smoothest string crossings. I'm thinking of a passage in the Saint-Saëns Violin Concerto No. 3 where, something like that, if it's not super smooth, it's going to sound, kind of jagged. This isn't fast enough where I would say that would become a actual big problem, but it's still pretty fast and you want it to be smooth, right? So phrase kind of concludes and it finally reaches another point of peace here after that big diminished chord. Yes, Bach just never ceases to amaze me and everyone, because there's just so much meaning, I think, behind all of these scalar figures, right? I mean, on the violin, it's just, just lift a couple fingers and you can play it. But as a singer, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do, si, do, sol, do, mi, re, sol, do. Apologies for my solfege. But we can really find a lot of inflection in the way we sing it, right? And it's digging deep. It's really to the bottom of the violin register here. So it's really not something that you just play kind of like... I mean, it's too easy that way, right? We need to not suffer, but we need to really dig deep and feel it deep inside us. This is a slight pause here. But this is our big stop. Interesting here, I trill starting from the B, but I think very common, it's people do... I think that can work too. I think with trills and Bach, both can work. And trills in general, both can work. I think in classical style, it's very common to trill from the top note. And I think it depends on this circumstance. So here, if you want to bring out the fact that it's a B, and it's this harmony, doing it from the bottom would make more sense. And also it makes sense because it brings out that resolution of the harmony there. Right there, I had kind of a gaping hole between the last note of the run to the bottom chord. And so, yeah, that's something that this piece is filled with. So much of this, you have to be kind of one motion crossing to the string crossing. And it's quite awkward because you need to lift the bow ever so slightly before you strike the bottom chord, or else, right, we don't want that. So we want to make sure that, again, we have the full sound of the note before connected to the next note. Here again, keep interest on the high F. Apologies for the slight uncleanliness. So here it just goes on. Again, we have this short gesture here. And the bass line is again descending. And that's a really deep chord there. It's a really tense chord. So again, this same trillier figure is present here. And I think whenever there's a lot of tension in this movement, he just resorts to this because it's sort of this tense and unsettling figure. So we go on. This is always quite awkward with the fifths. So getting it in tune is very tricky. So, you really have to position your finger and your hand and your whole arm correctly in order to get all those notes. And phrasing wise, we're really leading to the downbeat always, generally in music. Pickup always leads to the downbeat, right? So really bring that out with the bow. This is another tense moment. It's back to this diminished harmony. This A flat major is kind of like a silver lining. I never thought of this, but it's so beautiful. It's like when you have this intense argument, or you have a disagreement, or not even a disagreement, something, there's some commotion going on, and then someone comes in and brings out the silver lining. Like maybe you did badly on a test, but maybe the silver lining is that you'll do better next time, or you learned what you did wrong. And had you not had that bad test, you never would have known that you were always doing this wrong. So that's a really cool analogy I found here. It's hard to stop because of the descending bass line. You just need to keep playing. So again, this 2 and 2 figure. Here, the bottom voice starts and then the top voice joins. Interesting change. Same idea with the jumping between the bass and the alto voices here. I think it's kind of like someone deep and more experienced kind of reminding you, because we've got so much commotion here up top. When we hear a deep voice like that, it kind of gives us a little reassurance, I feel. So that's very interesting. Another thing I just noticed, if you saw a few seconds ago, I kind of shook a little bit between that string crossing there. And the reason why was because with the bow, when you get to the point where it's the closest to the hair, where the arc, because the bow, of course, is an arc, right? So when you get to the point where it's closest to the hair, that's actually the point where you have the least ability to really change what you do with the bow. In fact, it's hard and awkward to lift there, and you kind of just have to go through that point. With the tip, you can lift it a lot, and there's a lot of power there. It's also the weakest part of the bow, right? Because it has the least amount of tension before the stick will touch the hair. So in this moment here, because I landed right about there, right here, I'm doing the string crossing without lifting the bow on the string, right? Because on all of the other ones, like, I'm actually lifting the bow when doing the string crossing so that I don't hit other strings. Here, I actually don't lift the bow because it's kind of awkward. I mean, if I lift, I naturally want to go here rather than here. So if you saw what I did just there on this part, I gave it a little bit more feeling of singing and longer line. And I think that is good because there's been a lot of 2-and-2 gestures. And although the bowing marking is 3-and-1 here, if you just kind of follow the natural phrasing of that bowing marking, it's not super interesting. It's a little repetitive, even though it's really just blocking out harmonies, right? But this is really one of the few moments where it's just straight 16th notes. And I mean, this piece is Adagio, it's slow. So 16th notes are really like 8th notes. But I like to think of this as more singing and not so gestural, because we've had a lot of gestures. So such a dramatic and beautiful ending to this not extremely long, but this long and eventful journey that we've had. So we're really at the bottom here. We climb up here, right? He builds tension by using this syncopated bowing here. It's not, I mean, that would be eventful as well, but I'm veering on the edge of romantic concerto, loud concerto playing. But, you know, I don't think I'm going too far to the point of scratching. And if you play everything just so... Of course, on a Baroque violin, you would play more like that because of the gut strings. But, you know, I'm playing 440 pitch and I'm playing with the modern bow. So there's different colors that I can find by using more pressure. And so I think it's nice here. I don't think that you have to be so restricted. Of course, there's so many moments where I'm more floating. So I think in these real tense moments, this is really a climactic ending, right? Despite the last chord being long and drawn out and peaceful. But this is really reaching up for the top. I mean, this high B flat is basically the highest note in this whole piece. Yeah, we don't go ever above this B flat in this piece. So this is the highest point of the piece. So this reaching upwards. If you saw my Steven Studio episode 3, I talked about Schumann Concerto and this idea of reaching upwards as sort of looking up to God or something. And I think there's something of that same feeling here. Despite it being more tense compared to the Schumann one. But, of course, the resolution there. Again, the first page. That same motif here. Well, I end up backwards. So, yeah, this movement, there's a lot of repetitive themes. I would sum it up as it's going through lots of different harmonies, and there's lots of different flowing gestures that go between the harmonies. And there's moments where it's singing, and in those in particular are the 16th note sections, where it's kind of calm and you can play around with more legato rather than very grand gestures. Okay, so we went through every single measure of this piece, and I'm sure if I were to do this again, I would find new things to say. That's the beauty of violin and beautiful music like Bach. You can never get tired of it. So I thought I would play through the whole piece just as sort of a little performance. Obviously, I'm not really dressed up or anything, but just as a way to conclude every single one of these episodes, to prepare and play something more complete. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and I will see you in the fugue.